In this video, I'm going to explain about the ISIS broadcast network and also its configuration. As you can see here, again, we have three routers, router 1, router 2, and router 3, but they are connected to a broadcast or the Ethernet network. You know that in ISIS, when one interface connects to the broadcast or Ethernet network, we will have designated IS or DIS, and the DIS is the router, is the interface with the highest ISIS priority. And if the you want, you can change the DIS interface. First, let me to configure the scenario. After that, we will learn about the DIS configuration. Here, again, we should draw the topology. We should assign IP addresses and enable interfaces in all routers, and then check routing table. And after that, we should configure ISIS in router 1, router 2, and router 3. Let me to show you here in the router 1. First, let me to show you the routing table, show IP route. As you can see here, we have only connected network, one loopback interface, and one Ethernet interface. Let me to configure ISIS here. We learned about it in previous video, router ISIS. And after that, the net address can be configured 49.0.0.1, again quad 0, and then 0.0.0.1, for example 0.0. That's it. Or if you want, you can configure, for example, let me to change it here, 49.0.0.0.1, then quad 1, then again quad 1.0.0. Because here we have loopback 0 with this IP address, I use the IP address of loopback 0. This is unique. And after that, let me to use IS type level 1, and then log adjacency change all. Also, we should enable ISIS on the interface Ethernet 0.0 with IP router ISIS, and also on the interface loopback 0, again IP router ISIS. That's it. Let me to configure ISIS on the router 2, enable configure terminal, and then router ISIS. And after that, net address 49, then 0.0.0.1, and after that, for example, quad 2.0.0, and then IS type is level 1, and finally log adjacency change all, and after that, interface ETH 00, IP router ISIS. We expect to see neighborship now between the router 1 and router 2. As you can see here, we have neighborship. Also, interface loopback 0, IP router ISIS. That's it. In the router 3 also, let me to configure it. Enable configure terminal router ISIS. And after that, net configuration 49.0.0.1 dot quad 3.0.0. And then, for example, IS type level 1. And after that, log adjacency change all. Finally, interface ETH 00, IP router ISIS. And after that, interface loopback 0, again IP router ISIS. As you can see, we have two neighborship now between router 3 and 1 and router 3 and 2. Let me to show you again. From R1, we can check the show ISIS neighbor. As you can see, we have neighborship with both router 2 and router 3. Both of them are level 1 router. Both neighborship is established on the ETH 00. Here you can see the IP address of the router 2 and router 3 respectively. And also the state is up. Also in the router 2, we have similar condition, show ISIS neighbors. We have similar conditions. We have neighborship with router 1 and router 3. And also in the router 3, show ISIS neighbors can show us we have neighborship with router 1 and router 2. Also, in the router 1, if you check the routing table, show IP route ISIS, you will see that we have connectivity to both quad 2 and quad 3 here. And also in the router 2, show IP route ISIS. And also in the router 3, show IP route ISIS. Let me to check connectivity from R1 ping quad 2 with the source of loopback 0. As you can see, we have connectivity, or ping quad 3 with the source of loopback 0. Again, we have connectivity. From router 2 also, you can use ping quad 3 with the source of loopback 0. We have connectivity. And then here in the router 1, if you check show CLNS interface command, show CLNS interface ETH00, you will see that here we have some information about the interface ETH00. One of them is priority. The default priority of each interface is 64. And now all of these interfaces, the ETH00 of router 1, ETH00 of router 2, and also router 3, all of them have the priority of 64. Because of that, the router with the highest SNPA address, or highest MAC address, actually will be the interface with the highest SNPA will be the designated IS, or actually DIS. Here you can see DR. DR means DIS, designated router or designated IS. Here, as you can see, by default, the highest SNPA means the interface of router 3 will be the DIS, because the priority of all of these three are same. The highest SNPA chooses the DIS, but you can change this behavior. In the router 2 also, if you check show CLNS interface ETH00, you will see that again we have similar condition. And after that, also in the router 3, show CLNS interface ETH00 can show us exactly the actually same result. Okay, now assume that we want to change the R1 interface to the DIS. You know that in ISIS we don't have backup DIS, we have only DIS. Because of that, in R1, and it is actually it is preemptive. Okay, it means that when you change the priority, when you increase the priority, that interface will be converted to the, for example, DIS. And we don't need, for example, to clear OSPF neighborship or some other things, or ISIS neighborship actually. In the router 1, again, configure terminal. On the interface ETH00, I want to increase ISIS priority to 100. The value can be between 0 to 127. Let me to configure it as 100, that's it. Now, if you check show CLNS again, interface ETH00 in router 1, you will see that priority changed to 100, and now the DIS is the router 1. Also in the router 2, you can check it. In the router 2, you will see that the actually designated router is R1. This is the priority of the ETH00 of the router 2, not router 1. And also in the router 3, now we have similar condition. This is the priority of interface of R3, and this is the DIS. As you can see, we can easily change the DIS in ISIS, and this is the ISIS broadcast network. You know that in ISIS, we don't have backup DIS, and also in ISIS, the DIS election is preemptive, but in OSPF, we have DIS or designated router, and also backup designated router. Also, in OSPF, the DR election is non-preemptive, but here, as you can see, it is preemptive.